This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Emerging market shares slid to three-week lows today, led by a 3% drop in Hong Kong shares. MSCI's index of developing market shares slipped 1.3% on the day. Meanwhile, South Africa's JSE gained as investors eyed Finance Minister Tito Mbowene's budget speech. And analysts say that markets were prepared to view the budget outcome positively, especially as they expected a slight lowering in its debt trajectory. Now, financials led those gains. The index climbed almost 2% on the day, while the resources index was up almost 8% on the day. Now, also coming up on today's show, Ghana becomes the first nation to receive COVID-19 vaccines from the WHO's COVAX initiative. And South Africa's Finance Minister Tito Mboweni emphasizes fiscal discipline in his budget speech. And we take a look at some of Egypt's handmade products at the annual showcase. Now, the World Health Organization's global vaccine sharing scheme, COVAX, has delivered its first COVID-19 shots in Ghana. A flight carrying about 600,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, produced by the Serum Institute of India, landed in the country's capital, Accra. Now, this comes almost a year after the World Health Organization first described the novel coronavirus as a global pandemic. The delivery comes 8 months after the launch of the COVAX initiative, which was aimed at pulling funds from wealthier nations and nonprofits to help develop a vaccine and distribute it equitably around the world. These shots will be used by Ghana to start a vaccination drive from March 2nd that will prioritize frontline health workers and others at high risk of infection. And heading to Nigeria now, the country is targeting to increase its tax revenue to 15% of GDP by 2023 from the current 6%. The government is banking on a new Finance Act and tax reforms to achieve this goal. Now, the outbreak of coronavirus combined with low oil prices have depleted government revenues and raised the country's debt levels. Here's CGTN's Deji Batmus with the details.
Oil revenue essentially drives the Nigerian economy. And anytime the price of the commodity drops in the global market, Africa's largest economy catches severe cold. The government now says it is determined to fix the problem, fully diversify the country's revenue stream. Late last year, President Muhammadu Buhari signed a new finance bill into law, hoping that would help address the country's revenue challenge.
We have over 100 different amendments in the Finance Act 2020, amending like 14 different laws, including those that have to do with tax, fiscal responsibility, and public procurement. But overall, I think technology and tax intelligence, based on the amendments in the Finance Act 2020, are the biggest areas of impact that we can make.
Nigeria has one of the lowest tax collection rates in the world. The country's tax to GDP ratio is a mere 6.1%. But with the new Finance Act, the government is aiming to drive up the figure to 15%. It's also increased VAT from 5% to 7.5%.
It will require a lot of connected efforts and collaboration by all levels of government, states, federal, local government, bearing in mind that our tax to GDP ratio is not just about the revenue collected at the center alone. It would also require harmony, if I may put it that way, between tax policy, tax legislation, as well as administration. But at the center of all of these are the core issues of why is it that Nigerians don't pay taxes.
The government is hoping to use technology to increase the level of tax compliance in the country. The Finance Act empowers the tax authorities to connect all business premises in the country to a central server from where all their transactions will be monitored to ensure the right taxes are paid. But a number of businesses have been resisting the move, and tax evasion is still an issue.
At the heart of it is the low tax morale, and that low tax morale is driven by the lack of trust in government. One big way to address the deficit in trust is more transparency. Communicate what you collect, communicate how you spend it, and demonstrate prudence, efficiency, and transparency in doing it. But if you can progressively sustain the reforms that are being made, then it's possible to get there, especially now using technology and tax intelligence to prevent evasion and aggressive avoidance.
Despite the challenges, the government says it is beginning to see a growth in tax collections. But its goal of driving up tax revenue to 15% of GDP by 2023 might be a hard target, as businesses in the country are still reeling from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And experts have warned that recovery could actually take years. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And to South Africa now, where Finance Minister Tito Mboweni tabled his medium-term budget in Parliament earlier on Wednesday. Now, there was little to celebrate, as Africa's most industrialized economy is still in a deep recession and debt continues to rise. South Africans, though, were relieved that there were no tax hikes announced, but as usual, smokers and drinkers will be penalized. Here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu with the details.
South Africans are pleased that government scrapped its idea to pay for COVID vaccines through taxes. No tax hikes were announced when the finance minister delivered his medium-term budget in Parliament. Instead, tax brackets were lifted, providing some relief to the lower and middle income earners, and the corporate income tax rate was reduced to 27%.
Everything that we need to deal with is about putting free cash flow back into the cogs of the economy. So a lower tax rate definitely goes a long way, in that direction, and I guess it should hopefully generate some more for the fiscus, as well as provide a little bit of relief for business owners, trying to make a living out there.
$1.4 billion has been set aside for COVID vaccines that will be given free to the public. This is the largest vaccine rollout in South African history.
This campaign allows us to emerge from the restrictions that we have experienced to economic activity. We are allocating more than 10 billion rand for the purchase and delivery of vaccines over the next 2 years. We are increasing the contingency reserve from 5 billion to 12 billion to make provision for any further purchases of vaccines and to cater for any other emergencies.
$100 billion has been allocated for spending over the next 3 years. Social grants will be increased, more money will go towards early childhood development, and more COVID relief will be made available, and just under $1 billion will go to job creation initiatives.
We have cumulatively made 83.2 billion available for the public employment program since the 2020 special adjustment budget. We are now augmenting this by 11 billion rand for the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative.
There's been mixed reaction to the latest budget review, but many agree the minister did his best. South Africa's debt burden is still a major concern. The minister said debt will stabilize to 88.9% of GDP in about 4 to 5 years.
We've already seen a strong statement of intent, and it's been very, very difficult to buy into that, even with that action. Today's budget is almost a continuation of that statement of intent. It's a very, very clear message that the government intends to run its finances prudently.
As usual, there was no escaping sin taxes. Levies on liquor and tobacco products will be hiked by 8% with immediate effect. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Sudan has sharply devalued its currency as it seeks to overcome a crippling economic crisis and access debt relief. Now, the move is a key reform demanded by foreign donors and the International Monetary Fund. It was delayed for months as shortages of basic goods and rapid inflation complicated a fragile political transition. Here's CGTN's Adele El Marhoui with more details.
After 8 months of postponement, Sudan has finally decided to begin liberating its local currency. The central bank on Wednesday was offering the US dollar for 377 Sudanese pounds. That's nearly 7-fold the official rate of 55 pounds last week.
I believe it was a last resort for the government. There are many positive sides for the decision. It ends the black foreign exchange market. It encourages remittances to flow through official channels like banks. It will make local products offered at an attractive global price, which could boost exports. And with import prices increasing significantly, it'll scale down the volume of imported products.
Critics are concerned. Last month, the Sudanese Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok said Sudan doesn't have foreign reserves to defend its pound. With an apparent lack of control over the black market, higher inflation rates could be inevitable. Khartoum has reported 304% monthly inflation in January, up from 269% in December.
I believe we will see higher inflation. The parallel market is already offering the dollar 30 pounds higher than the official price. The government won't be able to keep up with the parallel market, so this way it could reach 500 pounds for a dollar. The dollar has become a commodity now, and we don't have any in Sudan, and there is no control over the market.
The government has limited exchange bureaus to trade at a 5% margin below or above the official rates. Liberating the pound will enable Sudan to get loans from the IMF to ease its economic downward spiral. Last year, Sudan began reforming its economy. It started by cutting petroleum subsidies, which makes up about 70% of all government subsidies. The devaluation of the Sudanese pound comes just 2 weeks after the government approves its 2021 budget. It forecasted the first positive GDP figure in years at just 1%, and it estimated the deficit to be 1.4% of the budget. The new exchange rate will probably tarnish these optimistic figures. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Ras Sedr, Egypt.
Well, now let's take a look at our corporate headlines today. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration says that Johnson & Johnson's one-shot COVID-19 vaccine appears safe and effective in trials. Now, last month, the FDA found that Johnson & Johnson's vaccine was 66% effective in preventing COVID-19 against multiple variants in a global trial, which involved nearly 44,000 people. Its panel of independent experts will meet on Friday to decide whether to approve the shot. And the head of the International Cocoa Organization, Michel Arianop, wants top cocoa producers, Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, to control supplies and join forces with other producing nations in order to achieve higher prices. Now, he says that his organization intends on working towards getting other producers, as well as consumers in Asia and the United States, to join the recently launched European Union Cocoa Dialogue with Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. And top executives at Texas-based software companies SolarWinds and Microsoft have defended their conduct in breaches blamed on Russian hackers and sought to shift responsibility elsewhere in testimony to a U.S. Senate panel. Now, cybersecurity firms FireEye and CrowdStrike were also present in the Tuesday panel. All four were victims in one of the worst hacks yet discovered, affecting about 100 U.S. companies and 9 federal agencies. And finally, Britain's Heathrow Airport plunged to a $2.8 billion annual loss. That's after passenger numbers collapsed. The airport said that during 2020, passenger numbers shrunk about 73% to 22 million people. Now, Heathrow called on the government to agree a common international travel standard to allow passengers to start flying again in the summer. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come on the show. Copper prices in a 9.5-year high. And we look at where some of the world's wealthiest are spending their money in 2021.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Now, copper prices touched a new 9.5-year high as investors continue to bet that tight supplies of the metal will continue as the world gradually recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, prices have shot up about 16% this February, the biggest monthly rise since November 2016, taking gains since the start of 2020 to around 50%. Analysts expect demand from the power and construction industries to overwhelm supply, potentially pushing prices into record territory above $10,190 per ton. Now, they also say that prices may see a pause in the short term, but the outlook still remains bullish and any corrections will be short-lived. Well, let's take that copper rally apart further. We're joined by Peter Major. He's a director of mining at Emergence. Great to have you on the show with us, Mr. Major. Now, of course, experts are saying that copper may be heading for a period of scarcity pricing. We're seeing investment firms like Goldman raising their 12-month price target to about $10,000 per ton. Given that prices are currently above $9,000 per ton, and of course looking at the fundamentals in the market, could we see copper exceeding those expectations?
Thanks, Uche. Yes, we can definitely see it exceeding that. And I know we haven't seen that price very often in 40, 50 years. But if you look at the circumstances we're living in now, this whole COVID virus, it's affected supply more than it's affected demand. And all of us made the assumption when it first broke out in February, March, that they would be equally affected. In fact, we thought demand would be affected even more than supply. And that's why the mining shares fell so hard. And that's why the commodity prices fell so hard, if you remember back in March, April. But nothing recovered quicker than these commodity prices. And I'm as surprised as everyone. And they have not stopped recovering since March last year. And the reason being, China is 50% of offtake now. China is like America was back in 1950s, 1960s. It takes in 50% of these commodities. And China managed to contain the virus very early on and very well. And it's not just that China has 1.4 billion people. China's producing for probably 50% of the rest of the world. And so their engine barely slowed down during the virus, and they're consuming copper like never before. They were already taking in 50%. But look at all the mines. The mines are in countries that have been hit hard by the virus. Copper comes mainly from South America and from Africa. And boy, who's been hit harder on this virus than South America and Africa? And so demand is stronger and has held up better than supply. And so, yes, these prices can easily go. When I see the cryptocurrency like Bitcoin exceed 50, I can easily see copper going to 10,000.
Well, let's take a closer look at the market. Now, last year, fund buying was pegged as the driver of copper's recovery. Today, they seem to be taking a long position, and certainly it seems like investors are worrying about the potential of a correction in the short term. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are you have very good sources and you're doing your job very well, because that's the latest information I've got, that it's not just as simple as normal supply and demand, that the funds, the hedge funds, the traders, the derivatives, They are playing a very big role in this. So I think you're 100% right, Uche. They are magnifying something that was happening anyways. And if you look at back to the 60s, copper went as high as 17,000 a ton. So if you now have traders and hedge funds and non-traditional users playing this game, yeah, copper could easily go from 10 to 12 to 14. But again, like you say, it's not sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable, but we can't just crank up supply. Zambia just can't invent electricity out of nowhere. The DRC can't just invent electricity and railroads out of nowhere. But China, they literally have demand out of nowhere. So the supply response is going to be very slow. And mines are afraid of just spending a lot of capex now to bring in more production when they're worried, hey, these are high prices. By the time our capex is spent, the mine comes into being, the prices fall. Miners have been burnt on all these bull runs before, and I've never seen them so constrained and so prudent as now. They're very reluctant to expend money on more capacity. So that's going to support these prices for longer than normal.
Well, we do have to leave it there, Mr. Major, but thank you so much for those great insights. That, of course, was Peter Major. He's a director of mining at Emergence. Well, let's move on now. The International Mineral and Mining Investment Conference of 2021 has kicked off at the Julius Nyerere Convention Center in Tanzania's capital of Dar es Salaam. Local and international stakeholders are discussing sector challenges as well as projections and available investment opportunities. Now, this year's theme is a mining sector for a stable economy and sustainable development. Of course, Tanzania is amongst the top 5 African nations producing gold, but it needs more investment in extraction of other minerals in order to boost its sector earnings. Take a look.
We are thankful to our president that he is the one who started this event, and we are getting more benefit for not from the government also, from each other also. We sharing our business, we sharing our ideas to different sector, different business. And we are thankful to our government and our country. They are doing very well and very best.
After 12 months, Your Excellency, it is indeed a win-win situation and a real example we can hold up to the rest of Africa and its investors. With the joint venture between Barrick and the government and the people of Tanzania, Tanzania is again leading the field in delivering a modern approach to mining investment and sharing of the value created in a true partnership.
Well, let's move on now to Morocco. The country's aerospace sector has seen some tough times thanks to the coronavirus pandemic. Now, official figures show that exports fell by nearly a third to $1.3 billion in 2020 from $1.9 billion in 2019. This was due to reduced air traffic, but the sector has started to recover thanks in part to manufacturers who are now shifting towards medical equipment. Here's CGTN's Terry Wangari with more.
Morocco's aerospace industry has been comparatively resilient during the global pandemic. The sector has only shed 10% of some 17,000 jobs. Signs of recovery are apparent, with manufacturers diversifying into other high-tech engine areas and medical equipment.
Before COVID-19, a growth of 20% was recorded for several years. It is an interesting growth, a significant technological development. But as you know, with the arrival of the pandemic, air transport stopped abruptly, which was impacted by a domino effect in the entire industrial chain of aeronautics. We have been affected by this pandemic. But when we compare with other regions of the world that operate in the sector, we have been much less impacted, and we have been very resilient.
The companies least affected by the pandemic were those that had extended into producing equipment for other sectors such as medical equipment. One such company is SERMP, a Casablanca-based company that supplies parts to French aircraft engine maker Safran. It recently won approval from health authorities to make medical devices after producing ventilators and machines making face masks.
We have gathered all our efforts to design, develop and manufacture 100% Moroccan respirator. So it practically took us 1 month of development and 1 month of production. We have managed to gather all these efforts to create this respirator, which is today in the validation phase before the delivery to the Ministry of Health.
The automotive industry, which has topped Moroccan exports for the last 3 years, saw exports drop to $8.1 billion in 2020 from $9 billion the previous year. That and the loss of jobs prompted the group of Moroccan aeronautics and space industries to launch a plan aimed at boosting the competitiveness of the aerospace sector.
In parallel, we have also developed other products such as mask machines in partnership with Renault. These machines are to provide mask manufacturers with a Moroccan tool, also produced 100% locally. All these small experiences pushed us to now create a biomedical cluster, which will serve as a kickoff of a medical and medical devices industry in Morocco.
The Moroccan Aerospace Institute has played an essential role during this period of crisis, a very important role in protecting human resources and talents. And this is why we launched a program called New Opportunities that allows giving youth, some of whom were let go from their factories because of COVID-19, and allow them to diversify their education in a way that will enable them to be rehired either in the aeronautical industry or other industries, especially in the medical and biotechnical fields.
Following Airbus' recent announcement to make carbon-free aircrafts by 2035, Moroccan operators see an opportunity. With the industrial plan in place, Morocco's aerospace sector stands a chance to expand. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
And heading to Egypt now, the country says a recently constructed 36-kilometer concrete and wire barrier, which encircles Sharm el-Sheikh, will help protect tourism at the Red Sea resort on the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. Now, authorities in southern Sinai hope to revitalize tourism, which has been dented by upheaval after Egypt's 2011 uprising, as well as the crash of a Russian passenger jet in Sinai in 2015 and the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. Here's CGTN's Yasser Akim reporting.
The Egyptian resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh is beginning to witness signs of potential slow recovery of tourist numbers this month. This as officials intensify efforts to attract new markets to fill the gap from the key tourist source markets of Russia, UK and Germany, following the collapse caused by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We took action. That's myself, the governor and a number of businessmen who have invested in the Red Sea. We went on a roadshow to Ukraine, Prague and Poland. I went to Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan twice, countries we didn't work with before. We were well received. Then they sent official delegations who loved this place, and afterwards, their tourist groups started flying in.
With the vital tourism industry suffering since the outbreak of the pandemic early last year, hotel owners are not leaving anything to chance and are applying strict anti-COVID-19 health measures to ensure they keep hold of the few tourists visiting the region.
We put very strict standards for the safety and hygiene. Plus, we don't allow any guest to come without the PCR. Plus, we do a lot of PCR tests to our employees. Social distance here is very important, the face mask. So we are doing everything. Meanwhile, we are trying to let the people enjoy their time.
And tourists here say they can feel the effort being put in place to guarantee their safety.
It's amazing and it's a lot of good experience, and we like this. No, we not afraid COVID, not afraid. In Egypt, in Russia, not afraid.
Amid the reduced tourist inflows, the government has been making use of the low traffic in the city to upgrade its security measures ahead of the return of visitors. New security equipment have been installed in and around Sharm Airport, and more extensive measures have been adopted to ensure a safe holiday for the tourists. This includes building a perimeter wall around the city.
The police and army officers are present everywhere. The president has built a 35-kilometer security wall surrounding the city with 4 main gates. Whoever enters the city will have to go through these gates. There will be thorough checkpoints, security cameras everywhere. Cars will be scanned and everyone will be scanned and sanitized before entering. It's completely safe.
In the meantime, several tour agencies and charter airlines from 2 of the largest markets, the UK and Germany, have begun making preliminary bookings to Egypt starting mid-April through the summer season. The reservations give slim hope of a potential recovery in the second half of 2021. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break. Still to come. China eradicates extreme poverty within its borders. And iconic cartoon characters, Tom and Jerry, make a return to your screens.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Just about 1:30, let's recap today's top headlines. Tanzania's government is urging its citizens to begin wearing face masks to protect them from what it's calling respiratory illnesses that are sweeping the country. Now, the health ministry says it has introduced specific measures to help the country fight the COVID-19 virus. This comes after the WHO once again asked Tanzania to share COVID-19 data. And scientists tracking the spread of new variants in Africa have their work cut out for them. A lack of genome sequencing capabilities in many African nations has made it difficult to determine if new strains, including the one first detected in South Africa, could be behind the resurgence of cases and deaths on the continent. Africa's coronavirus cases are edging towards 4 million with over 100,000 deaths. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, officials have confirmed a 7th case of Ebola in the eastern province of North Kivu. The latest patient tested positive for the disease on Tuesday. Now, authorities say 4 people have died of the contagious disease since the resurgence of Ebola was reported early this month. And finally, Guinea has also started an Ebola vaccination campaign. Authorities are racing to contain the first resurgence of the virus there since the world's most widespread outbreak between 2013 and 2016. The vaccination campaign was launched in a rural community in Gweke. That's where the first cases were detected on the 14th of February. And that's a look at our top headlines today. Well, let's get you some international news now. The Chinese government will on Thursday mark the country's accomplishment of ending extreme poverty. President Xi Jinping will lead the ceremony in Beijing. China, of course, declared victory in fighting poverty last year when it achieved the UN's development goal of poverty eradication 10 years ahead of schedule. In over 40 years of reform and opening up, 750 million people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. That's contributed to more than 70% of the world's poverty reduction goal. Now, China's poverty eradication efforts from 2012 to 2020 improved the lives of 100 million Chinese in impoverished rural areas. Within that period, 832 counties shook off poverty, and that's despite the challenge of COVID-19 in 2020. China did succeed in lifting the remaining 52 counties out of poverty. These were mostly in remote areas in the southwestern and western regions. Meanwhile, China says it has consolidated its position as the biggest trading country in 2020. The country says it will widen its high-level opening up and intensify economic cooperation for sustainable growth. Here's CGTN's Xiao Bing with more.
Stable and better than expected. That's how the Chinese Commerce Ministry described the country's economic development in 2020.
Despite the complex international situation and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, China has stabilized the basic foreign trade market, promoted the recovery of consumption, and made breakthroughs in bilateral economic and trade relations. It achieved a stable business growth, better than expected.
The Commerce Ministry said China's foreign trade in 2020 was impressive, with imports and exports amounted 32.2 trillion yuan, or nearly $5 trillion, up by almost 2% from a year ago. But he added there's still a lot of uncertainty ahead in 2021.
Our prediction is the situation is still going to be serious and complex. The impact from COVID-19 still exists. There are some unstable factors in the development of the supply chain and industrial chain, but we are determined to stabilize foreign trade and investment. This is our goal this year.
China also said it will intensify economic cooperation. After signing RCEP last year, the biggest free trade pact, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, Beijing said it will consider participating in another multilateral trade agreement, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, also known as CPTPP. The Chinese Commerce Ministry says in the year 2021, it will speed up building the new development paradigm, promoting high-quality commerce and deepening supply-side reform. The aim is to meet the growing demand of all Chinese people to a better life. Cao Bing, CGTN, Beijing.
Let's go to Singapore now, where startup Nervotech has developed an app to monitor health vitals in less than a minute to aid in early COVID-19 detection. Now, the app, which can be downloaded on phones, allows the user to confirm health vitals such as heart rate, oxygen levels, respiration rate, and even stress levels. Now, Nervotech's app has been used in Singapore to complement daily temperature screenings of specific site workers since December of 2020, and that's part of a government-initiated program. Singapore has kept a tight lid on its coronavirus infections, with government targeting high infection populations and areas for testing and treatment.
The application acts as a first line of defense by scanning the workers just by using the handphone. It is very convenient provided that the worker adhere to this scanning on a daily basis. So we do have our own temperature monitoring system installed as a second line of defense to reject all the personnel who are deemed unfit for work. So Nervotech application helps to provide a heads up on the potential risk of workers who are deemed unfit for work.
So basically, how a traditional photoplasmography-based technology relies on a sensor that's in contact with your skin. It's also paired up with a calibrated light from a green LED source. And what it's doing is measuring the differences in the reflectivity of that light corresponding to the different, the pulse rate of your body. So as long as the capillaries are filled with blood versus when it's not, in between the intervals of pulses, that's exactly what it's measuring.
Well, let's shift focus now. Iconic cartoon characters Tom and Jerry are returning to screens with their comedic slapstick violence, but this time they're entering the real world. Now, in Tom and Jerry, the pair inadvertently take their competitive antics to a posh hotel in New York, where the celebrity wedding of the decade is about to take place.
If a picture of this mouse is tweeted out to Instabook Face or TikTok, we will be ruined.
No, sir. That's not
Naturally, chaos ensues, and it's up to new hotel employee Kayla by Chloe Grace Moretz to try and curb the pair's long-standing behavioral problems.
It really does harken back to the Tom and Jerry that we love. It's 2D animation with little elements of 3D, but it's predominantly 2D animation, which I think, as a fan, was a really big deal for me. And then as well as that, they don't shy away from them bonking each other on the head and dropping the weights on each other and really going at each other.
I will not let this hotel be ruined by a cat and a mouse.
Comedian Colin Jost plays one half of the celebrity couple and feels the time is right for the warring couple to return to our screens during a pandemic.
They just take out all their feelings with violence. I think is very refreshing to see right now, and people can let out a lot of their frustrations through these characters.
Tom and Jerry were created back in 1940 and have had continued success over 8 decades, seemingly never putting a foot or paw wrong with audiences. Filming the comedy was a surreal experience for the actors. Often, they didn't have a script, and they also had to deal with a lot of cat and mouse stand-ins.
Every day, we all had to show up with our A game and show up with our energy and be able to leave our inhibitions at the door and just kind of walk in and either, fail flat on your face or fail forward and be able to achieve a funny moment in the story. But it definitely was, it was real trial and error, and we all just showed up to try to do our best. And most importantly, we were all massive fans of the original source material. So we all wanted to give credit and homage to that consistently.
Even though they're coming to our world, you also feel like you're going to their world a little bit in terms of the tone and how, it's not like you're quite animated, but you're maybe a little more animated than you would normally be. And I think that you want to match that kind of energy.
So tomorrow, I'm going to plan an entire day for you two to spend together out there.
Tom and Jerry can be caught in theaters and on HBO Max from February the 26th, right on the day of China's Lantern Festival. CGTN.
Well, let's head to Britain now, where 7 decades of British art will be going under the hammer this weekend at Bonhams. Here's a sneak peek.
One of the highlights of the exhibition is a print of Girl with Balloon by Banksy. It's considered to be one of the most iconic artworks of the 21st century. The artwork is expected to fetch between £100,000 and £150,000.
So the sale overall is a celebration of British creativity from 1950 to now, and the idea is that we are celebrating all aspects of creativity, so not just the fine arts, but also photography, fashion, entertainment, memorabilia, and also prints and multiples. So we have in the sale, for example, 18 Banksy prints, which is a really significant number. The top lot here is the Girl with Balloon at £100,000 to £150,000. This, of course, is very iconic given that the original was shredded in the Sotheby's sale in 2018. So that's a really interesting piece, and will definitely be exciting to see what happens on the day with those lots.
Another item in the sale is this image of Kate Moss, created by the Canadian-born UK-based artist Chris Levine.
She's Light Pure has been donated to the sale by both Chris Levine and the supermodel Kate Moss very generously, and the estimate on the work is £20,000 to £30,000. All proceeds from the sale are going to Oxfam GB to help with the fight against poverty.
Other items on display include boots designed by Damien Hirst and photos of The Who and the Beatles.
We also have some really cool fashion in the sale. Highlights include some Damien Hirst designed boots by Manolo Blahnik. They were sort of created, they were put on the spin machine and spun with paint, as in his normal works. So that's really exciting. We also have 3 works by the artist Yinka Ilori. He's a London-based multidisciplinary artist. And we've got 3 works by him, and that's really exciting. They're the first time his works have been offered at auction, and he also worked with us to curate a section of the sale.
The artworks are scheduled for auction on Saturday, February the 27th. 张梦媛, CGTN.
And shifting focus now, let's take a look at commodity markets today. After optimism about the economic outlook pushed commodity prices to new highs on a Tuesday, we saw them moderating today. Gold edged higher on a weaker dollar, but the metal held in a tight range as investors digest monetary policy cues from U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Also further supporting gold, benchmark 10-year U.S. Treasury yields also fell. And of course, analysts are saying in the near term, gold will continue to react to the moves in bond yields. Meanwhile, oil prices falling today, then moderating. That's after industry data showed that U.S. crude inventories unexpectedly rose last week, even as a deep freeze in the southern states curbed demand from refineries that of course were forced to shut then. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come on the show. Egypt showcases some of its handmade products in an annual exhibition.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, the French African Foundation has launched a Young Leaders program that seeks to identify high potential French and African people based all over Africa or in Europe. Now, the program, under the patronage of French President Emmanuel Macron, aims to bring together this new generation within a community which is committed to renewing ties between Africa and France. Applications will close on March 21st. Well, let's find out more about that program. We're joined by Gregoire Schwebig. He, of course, is a co-founder of the French Africa Foundation. Great to have you with us today, Mr. Gregoire. Now, the goal, certainly, of this project is to contribute to the emergence of a Franco-African new generation that you say is committed to specifically renewing ties between Africa and France. Explain to us how so. Oh, it looks like we have lost Mr. Schwebig there. Can you hear me, Mr. Schwebig?
Absolutely.
Well, let me ask you my question again. You say the goal of this project is to contribute to the emergence of a new Franco-African generation, and specifically you're committed to renewing ties between Africa and France. Can you give me a sense of how so?
Absolutely. It's a great question, and thank you very much for having me on the show. Our conviction is that we need to build a new relationship between France and Africa, and this relationship will not be based on our political system, but really will be initiated by the civil society, by entrepreneurs, by senior business executives, by people in the civil society. And so really our goal is to create a community of like-minded leaders and decision makers on both sides, on both continents, so in Europe, in France, and obviously in Africa. And that community of people who are gathered through that Young Leaders program, we really the aim of creating relationships and also building new projects to renew really this relationship for the future.
Now, as you just mentioned, you're looking to identify young African and French talents who have projects and wish to invest in building a common future, as you say. What sort of individuals are you looking at? And give us an update on that recruitment process.
Sure. I mean, we're looking at people, either French people or African people who have interested in both either France or Africa, who have already demonstrated a real leadership and have already achieved, a wonderful achievement. And we've just started our recruitment process of this 100 young leaders. We expect to have over more than 10,000 applicants based on our previous data. And the program is open to everyone to apply online to our website. And I encourage all of your viewers to obviously apply up until the 21st of March.
Well, let's talk about the end game here. You say these discussions at the program are meant to result in a report in the spring of 2022, where you'll highlight those recommendations for decision makers. Give us a sense of who you intend to give these recommendations to.
Yes, absolutely. I think the idea of the report is to have a common thread alongside the program. This year, because of the COVID, the theme is around the resilience, obviously. So really the idea is that our 100 young leaders will be organized through clusters. Half of the young leaders will be spending times in Paris, and the other half with Senegal, which is the country that is in co-hosting and co-organizing this 2021 cohort. And I think at the end of the program, on the common thread of the resilience, the idea is to come up with a report that can be shared with decision makers, from the political side or even the business economic side. But also, we really aspire that this report will translate into real tangible projects that could either be, initiated by our own young leaders or by other people who are, friends of the French African Foundation. But it's really, the idea is that this report should lead toward concrete project with concrete actions, and that can change the way or can change the relationship between France and Africa.
Well, we'll certainly be watching, Gregoire. Thank you so much for your insights today. That, of course, is Gregoire Schwebig. He is from the French Africa Foundation. Well, let's move on now. An exhibition is underway in the Egyptian capital of Cairo, showcasing the country's handmade products and heritage. The annual event features more than 300 exhibitors from the country's 27 governorates. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with more on that report.
A wide variety of products ranging from natural oils and perfumes to carpets and home decor are on display at this year's Diarna exhibition. It's a blend of beautiful homemade items inspired by culture of different cities in Egypt. This year's event is the 61st edition.
I have 2 workshops in Cairo where we make mosaic designs like this one on glass. The process is in 8 stages to reach the final product. I make the designs first, then it's transformed into a product in the workshops. Each of the 8 stages have a specialized craftsman. The highest demand is on our side lamps. We have clients in Sharm el-Sheikh, Hurghada and Daha. I do the designs with the clients while my father and brother run the workshops.
About 80% of the exhibitors are women, a reflection of the state's support for women empowerment.
I'm from Nubia in Upper Egypt. We are representing the Nubian Club with our work which depicts our culture in Nubia. Most of our work is Nubian, like jewelry, accessories, bags and candles. All the work is handmade and has been designed by women only. The exhibition is very well advertised and gives us access to many new clients who have come to view the products. It's our first time to participate. We joined after visiting the exhibition before and seeing the huge demand by the public.
What caught my eye are the displays exhibited by former teacher Fatma Warith, who is now disabled.
I make home accessories like carpets, baskets, beanbags, as well as clothes and handbags. All is handmade. It was my hobby as a youngster, but then I had an accident and was confined to the wheelchair. I vowed I will not spend my life in bed, so I decided to make a project from my handmade work, which I have always loved. I used to do everything by myself, but then I trained some women and they work for me now, and we're doing well.
The Diarna Fair takes place in Cairo once a year, but is also held in other cities such as Luxor, Aswan and Sharm el-Sheikh. Organized by the Ministry of Social Solidarity, the gathering is meant to support the handcraft industry.
The main problem they face is how and where to market their product, especially if it's a small family that's doing the work. The exhibition is the best means to do so and reach out to the visitors here to show them their handicraft designs. We also help exhibitors land long-term deals with traders. It helps the workshops to be sustainable. Sales have reached 2 million Egyptian pounds in the first couple of days and are expected to more than double by the end of the fair.
I don't miss any exhibition by Diarna. I visited the event last year. This year, I'm here and was also at the North Coast last summer. I buy for myself, my mother and sister. The variety and handmade quality is very high. It's also unique, and when I wear a bag or buy an item for the house from here, my friends love it and want to have the same.
The high demand by the public and sales recorded give hope for growth of this industry. In spite of the self-restrictions because of the COVID-19, there's been a lot of demand on this fair, and that has made the organizers decide to extend the days of the fair for an extra 3 days. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, before we leave you today, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies. Now, South Africa's rand slipped today, falling about 0.4%. And analysts are saying that investors did not see Finance Minister Tito Mbowene's budget speech offering any significant fiscal consolidation beyond what was announced by President Ramaphosa recently. Any surprises expected were to be positive. They also say the fiscal risks will continue to put pressure on the rand going forward and entail downside risks. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira gaining against the US dollar today at the investors and exporters window, as we see Nigeria's government external reserves continue to plunge about $1.1 billion in less than a month. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.